Tonight, I'm going to take you on a calm and gentle journey through the history of one of the most fascinating cities in the world, London. In this whispered story, we'll travel far back in time to when this land was wild and untouched. We'll walk through the Roman era, when a small riverside settlement called Londinium began to rise. We'll meet the Anglo-Saxons and witness how new villages grew beside ancient walls. We'll explore the medieval streets, crowded and chaotic, where plagues spread, bridges fell, and cathedrals reached for the sky. We'll whisper through the Great Fire, feel the city crumble, then watch it rise again, stronger than before. We'll wander into the Victorian Age, when London became the largest city in the world, filled with fog, industry, and dreams. And finally, we'll arrive in the modern era, a city of glass towers, endless voices, and lights that never sleep. All of this told softly, slowly, so you can relax, drift away, and imagine the city as it was and as it is. So, find a comfortable place. Let the outside world fade away, and let's begin our whispered journey through time. Before the bright lights, before the endless streets and the busy sound of the city, this land was quiet. Imagine soft green fields, a wide, calm river flowing gently through the mist. Here, long before London had a name, wild animals wandered freely. Cave lions, oxen, even rhinoceroses roamed the place where black taxis now line up at traffic lights. Thousands of years ago, small human communities began to appear along the banks of the River Thames. They built simple shelters, raised sheep and cattle, and slowly, life began to take root. Centuries passed. Hunters became farmers. Paths became trails. And then, everything changed. In the year 43 CE, the Romans arrived. They chose this quiet bend in the river for a reason. It was perfect for trade, for control, for a future city. Here, they built a small settlement. They called it Londinium. At first, it was tiny, only half a square mile. But it grew quickly. Streets were paved, markets were built. A grand basilica rose above the settlement. Walls began to surround the city, protecting it from the outside world. Within a few decades, more than 60,000 people lived here. Merchants from distant lands came by river. Soldiers marched through the gates, and Londinium became one of the largest cities north of the Alps. But like all cities that rise fast, Londinium faced fire, plague, and decline. Parts of it burned. Parts were abandoned. Yet the Roman walls stood strong, silent witnesses to everything. Those walls still exist today, hidden among modern buildings. They remind us where it all began. As the Roman Empire began to fade, so did Londinium. The soldiers marched away. The money, the order, the protection, all disappeared. By the early 5th century, the great Roman city was shrinking. Buildings crumbled. Walls were covered in wild vines. Streets that were once full of merchants and soldiers became silent. But the land didn't stay empty for long. New people began to arrive. Tribes from the lands we now call Germany, Denmark, and the Netherlands. They came slowly at first, settling near rivers and fertile land. These were the Anglo-Saxons. Instead of rebuilding inside the abandoned Roman city, they chose to settle just outside its walls, to the west. By the late 7th century, a new town had emerged, Londonvich, London trading town. Imagine a small riverside village, wooden huts, smoke rising from chimneys, traders unloading goods from boats on the Thames. Gradually, this little settlement grew. Markets became busier. People traveled from distant places to buy and sell. Then, in the late 9th century, everything shifted again. The old Roman walls still stood, strong and protective. And in a time of Viking raids, protection was everything. So the focus moved back inside the Roman walls. Lundinvich became Lundenburg, the fortified city. The walls were repaired. The city came alive again. But it was different now. Anglo-Saxon London was smaller than Roman Londinium, but it was a place of trade, resilience, and new beginnings. Life here wasn't always peaceful. Viking armies often attacked, sometimes even destroying the London Bridge. Yet, the city held on, quietly becoming the heart of a new era. As centuries passed, the Anglo-Saxon city grew stronger. By the 11th century, London was becoming more than just a trading town. It was the heart of a kingdom. In the year 1042, Edward the Confessor became King of England. He was deeply religious, and he chose to build something grand just west of the city. A church unlike any other at the time. Westminster Abbey rose slowly from the ground, stone by stone. Near it, a royal palace was built. From this place, England would one day be governed. After Edward's death in 1066, a new ruler took the throne, William the Conqueror. And with him came a new era. To secure his power, William began constructing a massive stone fortress on the eastern edge of the city, the White Tower. It would grow to become the Tower of London, a place of power, fear, and history. As the Middle Ages unfolded, London expanded. Streets became busier. markets overflowed with traders from across Europe. By the year 1300, the population had grown to 80,000, making London one of the largest cities in Europe. But this growth came at a price. The streets were filthy. Open sewers ran through neighborhoods. Tanneries, fishmongers, and butchers filled the air with strong smells. Legislation tried to keep the river clean, but it was never enough. And then there were the fires. Wooden houses built close together made the city vulnerable. In 1091, a powerful tornado tore through London, destroying hundreds of buildings. Over time, London Bridge, made of wood, burned and was rebuilt again and again, until a new stone broke, and if fire didn't bring fear, disease did. In 1348, the Black Death arrived. The plague swept through London's crowded streets. As many as 200 people died every day. The city fell silent, but like before, London endured. Churches rose, including the magnificent Old St. Paul's Cathedral, with its tall spire and stained glass windows. Palaces and markets flourished again. Medieval London was a city of extremes: faith and fear, beauty and chaos, silence and song. A city growing steadily towards something far greater. As the Middle Ages slowly came to an end, a new chapter opened for London. A chapter filled with power, ambition, and transformation. The Tudor era began in 1485 with the reign of King Henry VII. Over the next century, London would grow from a busy medieval town into one of the most important cities in all of Europe. Trade was booming. Merchants from across the continent, from France, Germany, and Denmark, came to London seeking opportunity. Ships sailed the Thames, carrying goods to and from distant lands. Europe, the Levant, and even the Americas. The population grew quickly, from around 50,000 to nearly 200,000 people. Towns on London's edges, like Shoreditch and Southwark, began to blend into the expanding city. The streets were alive with voices speaking different languages, footsteps echoing through narrow alleys, the sounds of markets buzzing from dawn until dusk. But this era wasn't only about trade. Culture flourished. London became a place of music, art, and theater. Taverns echoed with songs. Archers competed on the fields, and traveling actors performed lively plays. In the late 16th century, theater companies built grand playhouses outside the city walls, places where laughter, tragedy, and poetry filled the night air. One of these theaters, built in 1599 across the river in Southwark, was called the Globe, and on its stage, the words of a young playwright named William Shakespeare came to life. Theaters were sometimes censored, even banned within the old city walls for moral and health reasons. Large crowds were thought to spread disease. But that didn't stop the people. They crossed the river in thousands to watch stories unfold beneath the stars. Meanwhile, the wealthy moved into grand homes along the Strand and beyond. Royal palaces, like Hampton Court, displayed the power and luxury of the Tudor court, complete with gardens, hunting grounds, and even indoor games like bowling and tennis. Yet beneath the elegance, London was still dirty, chaotic, and dangerous at times. But it offered something new, something irresistible, a world of opportunity, culture, and ambition. London was stepping onto the world stage, and the world was beginning to take notice. The Tudor era had filled London with life, trade, and culture. But the 17th century would test the city like never before. The Stuart dynasty rose to power, and London continued to thrive. Theaters flourished, markets expanded, and ships arrived daily along the Thames. But hidden in the crowded, twisting streets, something was coming: the Great Plague. In 1665, disease spread through London like a silent storm. Day after day, families disappeared behind closed doors, marked with red crosses. The air was thick with fear. Over 100,000 people lost their lives, nearly a quarter of London's population. The poor suffered the most, trapped in narrow streets and crowded homes, while the wealthy fled to the countryside. For 18 long months, London held its breath. The city was quiet, except for the distant sound of carts carrying the dead through the darkened streets. And then, just as the plague began to fade, a new disaster struck. September 1666. In a small bakery on Pudding Lane, a spark turned into a fire. London's medieval layout, narrow alleys, wooden houses, thatched roofs, was the perfect fuel. The fire spread quickly, leaping from house to house. For 4 days, flames consumed the heart of the city. St. Paul's Cathedral, the old Gothic masterpiece, collapsed into glowing embers. Thousands of homes vanished. Samuel Pepys, a Londoner of the time, climbed a church steeple to watch. He wrote that it was the saddest sight of desolation that I ever saw. When the fire finally died, much of central London lay in ruins. But from the ashes came renewal. The city began to rebuild. Streets were redesigned, wider and safer. New stone buildings replaced old wooden homes, and a new St. Paul's Cathedral, designed by Sir Christopher Wren, began to rise. Its elegant dome becoming the crown of London's skyline for centuries to come. The fire, though devastating, cleared away centuries of decay. It forced the city to modernize, to begin again. The London that emerged from the flames was still the same city at its heart, but stronger, ready to grow into the great metropolis the world would come to know. From the ashes of the Great Fire, a new London was born, a city rebuilt with wider streets, stone buildings, and a growing sense of ambition. As the 18th century began, London was ready to rise higher than ever before. The population was growing rapidly. At the start of the century, about 630,000 people lived in the city. By the end of it, nearly 1 million souls called London home. Streets were busier than ever. The Thames was crowded with ships, their masts rising like a forest of wood and canvas. Goods from across the world flowed into the city. Spices, fabrics, sugar, tea, tobacco, treasures of empire. This was also a cultural golden age. Institutions like the British Museum and the Royal Opera House were founded. Artists, writers, and philosophers gathered in coffee houses, sharing ideas that would shape the world. London was becoming not just a British city, but a global capital. But behind the grand facades, life was not perfect. Poverty remained widespread. Streets were still dirty and dangerous. Crime was common, and the gap between the wealthy and the poor grew wider. In the summer of 1780, the city was shaken by the Gordon riots. Days of violence, looting, and flames. The destruction was so great that some compared it to the chaos of the French Revolution. Yet, even through unrest, London continued to expand. New neighborhoods like Soho, Bloomsbury, and Covent Garden became residential hubs. Villages like Islington and Hampstead, once separate from the city, were slowly absorbed by its unstoppable growth. By the end of the century, London stood as one of the largest cities in the world, a city of elegance and intellect, but also of struggle and survival. Its streets whispered both wealth and want. Its buildings stood tall, while its people moved restlessly toward the future. As the 19th century began, London was on the brink of something extraordinary. The city that had endured fire, plague, and centuries of change was about to become the largest city in the world. By the 1860s, London's population had reached over 3 million. By the end of the century, more than 6.5 million people filled its streets. The Industrial Revolution had transformed the city. Factories rose where fields once lay. Railways cut through neighborhoods, connecting London to every corner of Britain. Smoke drifted from chimneys, painting the sky a permanent gray. London earned a new nickname, the Big Smoke. The air was thick with coal dust. Buildings, trees, even the sheep in Regent's Park turned a sooty shade of black. But alongside the smoke came innovation. In the 1860s, London began building something the world had never seen before: an underground railway. The Metropolitan Line, the first of its kind, opened in 1863. Millions of passengers began traveling beneath the city, a marvel of engineering that would become the famous London Underground, the Tube. London also became the beating heart of a global empire. Ships came from every continent. Goods, ideas, and people flowed through its docks. Culturally, London flourished. The National Gallery, Tate Britain, and many other landmarks were founded during this period. Tower Bridge, Big Ben, and the Houses of Parliament rose into the skyline, giving the city the iconic look we know today. But behind the grand architecture, life was often harsh. Poverty was widespread. Thousands lived in overcrowded slums, struggling to survive in the shadows of wealth. Writers like Charles Dickens captured the reality of this world. The dark alleys, the hungry children, the smog-filled mornings. Yet, through it all, London pulsed with energy. Industry, invention, and ambition pushed it forward. It was a city of contrasts, progress and pollution, elegance and hardship, standing at the center of a rapidly changing world. As the 20th century arrived, London stood tall, a global capital, the beating heart of an empire, a city of millions. But soon, the world would change, and London with it. Between 1915 and 1918, during the First World War, German airships appeared in the night skies over London. Their engines hummed above the rooftops, their bombs falling silently through the dark. Hundreds of civilians lost their lives. It was the first time the city had ever experienced war from the air. And then, a generation later, came an even greater storm, the Second World War. Beginning in 1939, London became the target of the Blitz, the German bombing campaign. Night after night, sirens echoed through the city. Families huddled in underground shelters as bombs rained down. Buildings collapsed. Fires lit up the night sky. By the end of the war, around 30,000 Londoners had been killed, and 1.5 million were left homeless. Streets that had stood for centuries were reduced to rubble, and yet, through the fear and the destruction, London endured. When peace finally came, the city began to rebuild once again. But the world had changed. Many Londoners left the crowded center, moving to suburbs and nearby towns, searching for space and fresh air. Government policies even encouraged people to move outward. New towns were created, places like Milton Keynes, to give people new beginnings beyond the smoke and ruins. By the mid-20th century, London's population began to decline. especially in the inner districts. The city's borders stopped expanding as fast, and its role shifted. But in the 1990s, things began to change again. London became a global financial hub, drawing people back with new jobs, opportunities, and life. The city transformed into a mosaic of cultures, languages, and communities. New buildings rose alongside historic ones. Old neighborhoods found new energy. London had survived war, loss, and transformation. And once again, it adapted, becoming the modern, diverse metropolis we know today. As the century turned once again, London stepped confidently into the modern age. The city that had once been walled by Romans, crossed by Vikings, reshaped by fire, and darkened by smoke, now reached for the sky. London became one of the most diverse cities in the world. People from every corner of the globe came to live, work, and build new lives. More than 300 languages are spoken in London today. Streets echo with a symphony of accents, cultures, and traditions. Neighborhoods like Brixton, Brick Lane, Southall, and Notting Hill became living mosaics, each corner carrying a story from faraway lands. The skyline changed, too. Historic landmarks like St. Paul's Cathedral, Big Ben, and Tower Bridge were joined by striking modern towers. The Shard, rising 95 stories into the sky. The Gherkin, with its unique glass design. The London Eye, slowly turning above the Thames. London became a blend of old and new, stone and steel, whispers and glass. By the 21st century, it was home to nearly 9 million people, a global financial center, a cultural hub, and a city that never truly sleeps. The Tube carries millions each day beneath the streets. Red buses glide past centuries-old buildings. The river still flows calmly under the bridges. The same river that's been there since the beginning. London has changed, but it has never lost its heart. A city built on layers of time, past, present, and future, all existing together. And now, our whispered journey through London's past gently comes to rest. We've walked along misty riverbanks where wild creatures once wandered. We stood beneath the Roman walls of Londinium. We watched the Anglo-Saxons build their towns, heard the bells of medieval churches rise above crowded streets. We felt the heat of the Great Fire. We wandered through golden ages of trade, power, and art. We stood in the shadows of Victorian smoke, and we listened to the echoes of air raid sirens in the dark nights of the Blitz. We watched the city change, grow, transform, from stone to glass, from whispers to roaring streets. London has lived through centuries of stories. Every building, every alley, every ripple on the Thames carries memories. As you sit here or lie back, eyes closed, Imagine the quiet of the city at dawn. The sky is pale, the river calm, the streets almost empty. In that stillness, you can almost hear it. The soft whispers of time flowing through the city. The past and the present meeting in silence. London is not just history in books. It is history living, breathing, waiting to be heard. So let your mind drift. Let the layers of time wrap gently around you, like a soft blanket of memories. This is the end of one journey, but the whispers never stop. Beneath the busy streets of modern London lies another world, a quiet, shadowy labyrinth layered with centuries of forgotten stories. Far below the sound of footsteps and traffic, you can still find traces of Roman Londinium. Buried walls, fragments of old roads, pieces of ancient mosaics, silent reminders of the city's first heartbeat. As centuries passed, new tunnels were carved into the earth. Secret passageways beneath old churches, vaults under markets, places where merchants hid their goods, or where people sought refuge during dangerous times. In the 20th century, during the terrifying nights of the Blitz, thousands of Londoners descended underground to survive. Tube stations turned into shelters. Long platforms filled with families lying side by side, wrapped in blankets, listening to the distant rumble of bombs above. In the darkness, people whispered to each other, waiting for dawn. Some tunnels are still in use today. The London Underground, a living network beneath the city, carrying millions daily. But others have been closed for decades. Forgotten stations, bricked up passages, staircases that lead nowhere. They rest in silence, hidden behind locked doors and dusty walls. Some say, if you walk through London at night and listen closely near certain streets, you can feel the faint echo of footsteps below. A reminder that London doesn't just exist above ground. It breathes beneath the surface too. Layers of history, secrets, and whispers, just waiting to be heard. When night falls over London, the city exhales. The rush of the day softens. The traffic fades into distant murmurs. Streetlights flicker on, one by one, like soft golden stars scattered along the streets. The Thames flows quietly beneath the bridges, its surface reflecting lights from buildings, boats, and towers. If you walk along the riverbanks at midnight, you might hear nothing but the water's gentle rhythm, the soft whisper of the wind curling through narrow streets, and the occasional footsteps of someone wandering home. The historic landmarks seem different at night. St. Paul's Cathedral stands tall, bathed in pale light, its dome glowing softly, Tower Bridge, illuminated against the dark sky. Looks like something out of a dream. The shard pierces the night, its tip disappearing into the clouds. In quiet neighborhoods, old brick houses rest in silence. Window lights turn off one by one. The city, for just a few hours, slows its endless rhythm. It's in these quiet moments when London whispers the loudest. The weight of history floats through the air. The sound of the river carries memories. The streets become a living storybook, hushed, patient, waiting. London at night isn't empty. It's alive, just softer, quieter, like a friend leaning in to tell you a secret. For centuries, London has been built not only by stone and wood, but by people. Every street, every corner, every sound carries the echo of lives once lived here. Romans who crossed the sea to build a city on the riverbanks. Anglo-Saxons who traded in small wooden huts. Medieval craftsmen who carved stone and rang the church bells. In the centuries that followed, traders, travelers, dreamers, and survivors arrived from every direction. French Huguenots fleeing persecution, Irish families escaping famine, Jewish communities building new homes, people from India, Africa, the Caribbean, Eastern Europe, and beyond, each bringing languages, traditions, flavors, and stories. Markets filled with unfamiliar spices and warm breads. Streets alive with songs, laughter, and sometimes sorrow. Over time, these voices intertwined, creating a tapestry of cultures, a living chorus that became the soul of London. In Brixton, the rhythm of reggae echoes through the night. In Brick Lane, the scent of spices floats through the air. In Notting Hill, colors explode during carnival, dancing through the streets like a heartbeat. Children grow up switching between languages effortlessly. Neighbors from opposite sides of the world share stories over cups of tea. This is London through people's eyes. A city where identities blend, shift, and find new forms. A place where history isn't just told in museums or carved in stone, but lived every single day by millions of voices. London is not only made of buildings, it's made of us. And now, as the city sleeps beneath a quiet sky, our whispered journey through time reaches its gentle end. We began on soft riverbanks where the Thames flowed untouched, where wild animals roamed, where humans first left their footprints in the mud. We walked through Roman streets, past stone walls and marketplaces alive with distant voices. We watched the Anglo-Saxons build their wooden towns beside ancient ruins. We stood in the heart of medieval London, where bells rang over crowded alleys, where fire and plague tested the city's strength. We felt the heat of the Great Fire, the silence after the plague, the determination to rise again. We saw ships arrive from every corner of the world. We heard the clatter of horse carts in Victorian streets, the rumble of the first underground trains. We listened to the sirens of war echoing in the night skies and felt the resilience of people huddled underground, waiting for morning light. And then we stood in modern London, a city of glass and stone, of hundreds of languages, millions of dreams, a place where the past and present walk side by side. Through it all, one thing remained constant: the Thames, flowing quietly, patiently, carrying whispers from every era. Time moves like the river, never stopping, never repeating. London has changed and will keep changing. But if you stand still, just for a moment, and listen, you can hear it. The hum of the city, the heartbeat of history, the endless whisper of time. So now, let your mind drift back through the centuries or forward into dreams. You've walked through Roman walls, medieval alleys, smoky streets, and modern skylines. You've listened to the city's story, and now it's time to rest. London remains, outside your window, across the sea, or just within your imagination, always whispering, always flowing, like time itself. Good night.